Hey, we're good on this side.
We're good on that side, which is weird that it's showing this craziness on this side. All right, so we got video. Hit record. All right. It's like, you know, when you work at home and then you go out of state for like a little bit, all your tech just decides to fail.
I was even gonna ask if your tech ever fails.
Yeah. Tech fails all the time. So, well, I guess
We did it.
we're live. Yeah. So I guess I set it off. Welcome back to Uncaged podcast. And I'm chilling here with the SEO Beastmaster himself, Damon Burton.
I should have went and got the shirt.
Yes, the SEO Beastmaster shirt. So what are we talking about today, D?
Well, I think you have this beautiful hat over here because I went to look for my black hat and I couldn't find it.
Mhm.
And here it is.
Yes,
It's in his hands.
it's in his hand with random jargon information that he's going to select, and we're going to talk about it because we didn't know what to talk about. We was like, we got to do an episode before I ride out. So,
Well, we got to give some context now. So Chanel and I met, what was it, probably like a year and a half ago?
just about. Yeah.
So we stayed in touch. He flew all the way out from Atlanta to Utah, came to a big birthday party I had, made a bunch of intros and just kind of stayed in touch that way. And he was coming to speak. You're speaking tomorrow?
Yep.
He's speaking at a place tomorrow and came and killed the weekend with me. So there you go.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting too, because it was kind of like before I knew who he was, it's kind of like, oh, I saw his content and I was like, oh, I like this dude. I like his swag. I like what he's doing. So I just, kind of conquered the fear, and I was like, I'm gonna reach out to this man. And
It's
like,
so scary.
You got to be honest with it. I mean, if you have not met somebody for the first time and you're going to reach out to him cold and be like, hey, dude, I want you on my podcast. And it could go one way or the other. He could have been like, who the hell are you? Why the hell are you contacting me? Or it went the other way. And he was like, yeah, sure. Here's my link. And I was like, that was easier than expected. What?
Thank you.
Yes.
We can even talk about that maybe here in a minute. That's one of the things we can make a little note about is reaching out to people, because I was just telling you about how I've reached out with some of the listeners might be familiar with Zach Benson or Dennis Yu, and I did the same thing. I just reached out to him, and if the luck of the draw blesses us, we will talk about that.
This is like, high tech. This is really high tech right here. I mean, we could have did like a digital spin wheel.
Yeah, kid's got a magic 8-ball.
It's on you, man.
Okay. All right. Oh, I can't look. Gotta mix it up. All right. First topic is.
Oh man.
For those that can see the audio or the video, marketing.
Yeah. Not to be confused with the lower third of a mill part marketing, but yes.
Damon marketing.
Digital.
Oh, okay.
Digital marketing.
Digital marketing. All right, what are we going to talk about? This needed like a couple layers to this post-it note. What are we going to talk about digital marketing?
No, it's kind of, we've been talking about digital marketing this entire time. And like we was hiking through the woods talking about digital marketing, digital strategies. It's just kind of like there's so many ways of doing the same exact thing. So we could probably.
That's what we're going to talk about is stop doing the same thing in so many different ways. So let's talk about Chanel.
Time for me to do something.
That was him. That was totally him.
Time for me to do something.
How many email lists do I have?
This dude, potentially, you have email lists. You just don't use the email lists.
I don't have a list. Yeah. Okay. How many email campaigns or strategies do I have? How many sources of paid lead gen do I have?
I'm doing the middle finger in it.
How many people do I have on my sales team?
Zero.
All the above. So there's beauty in staying in your lane. We've all heard that, stay in your lane, right? So I have a lot of friends that have found success in a lot of different ways, and a lot of them found it through a combination of multiple things. Me, I found success in one thing, SEO, And it's not because I don't have other opportunities. It's just I've got really good at saying no to those other things, because I think a problem, especially with newer entrepreneurs, I mean, this has always been a problem throughout time, but with how many different opportunities there are to make money or get exposure or have followers online, it's just you drown in opportunity. It's like I want to do these 100 things, and I've got really good at doing the one thing. So it's not that I don't want an email list or see the value in it. It's just I don't want to break this other thing. Like I don't want to go make 50 cents at the expense of making $1. And so I'll put those things aside until whatever the other thing is perfected, and then I'll introduce the other thing one at a time. So there's a lot of things that I want to do. I want to do an email list. I want to have a sales team. I want to have funnels. I want to do, social media, but I don't. I do Facebook and LinkedIn, but that's it. But I'm not on Instagram. I'm not on Twitter. And to give context, if I'm sure a lot of people have no idea who I am, which is very fair considering I just said I don't do anything.
But still, you're on Forbes and you're on a bunch of other platforms as well too. So I think some people definitely know who you are.
Yeah. So I do 7 figures annually, but the point is I do it all without chasing all the other shiny objects that everybody else tells you to go chase. And so one way that I've kind of compared this is there are ways to make a lot of money a lot faster than I have, but you also lose it a lot faster than I have. So there's a lot of people that have made $1 million a lot quicker than I have, but I haven't lost my money. And it's because what we were talking about when we were hiking is processes and foundations. So there's a big difference between having a product and having a business. You can make a ton of money having a product or like a singular service, but if you don't have the foundation of the business behind it, you're also going to lose that a lot quicker than somebody else that made. It's like, the tortoise and the hare kind of thing. So you can get there a lot faster, but it's there's a lot to be said to the art of sustainability in keeping what you build and maintaining it and continuing it in motion.
Yeah, I mean, I think like literally this entire trip, like every time I would ask him a question about something, like with marketing or systems or whatever, his response was, "Nope, I don't have that. I don't want to ruin my agency." Like that was the genuine consensus every single time. He's like, it's working. Why would I take $2 from here to make 50 cents over here? And it definitely makes sense. But I think you have an advantage that most people don't have per se, because again, your leads are coming 100% organic when people are essentially dying for organic. So let's talk about that a little bit. Like, do you think you would have been who you are if you didn't have like that niche of SEO in your back pocket?
Yeah, because this is one thing I talk about a lot too, is not forcing a path. And you probably heard earlier today, I had a Zoom with just a new contact, and I was telling them how I've dated the phases of my career. And so you going all the way back even for I own an agency. So I've owned an agency for 15 years. So going back, 20 years ago, when I was in even 25 years ago, whatever. So it's like, let's go back to my first job. My first job, I was 16, I was a janitor at a junior high school. And from that, there's, maybe the things that immediately come to mind stereotypically is like, why would I want to deal with garbage all day? Why would I want to clean schools and stuff like that? Well, sure. But then you take from it the things that, this is why I say you date the phases, is it's just like in a relationship. When you're dating somebody, you get a clearer picture on what you like and don't like in relationships and in yourself. And then if that relationship ends, then you go in the next relationship knowing better. And so it's like that in a career. So when I was a janitor, it was like, here's all the cool things. It's Monday through Friday. I get every weekend off. School is part of the government bodies. I get every holiday paid. Since I was 16, I wanted my nights too. And so my work schedule was 3:30 p.m. to 7 p.m. So I get all nights off. I get all weekends off. I get paid holidays. And at the time, I got paid better than minimum wage. At the time, minimum wage was like, I think it was $5.15. And I got paid like $6.75 an hour. So it was awesome. And so then I take that and I get my first job in retail. And retail sucks for obvious reasons. But then from there, I took what I liked and didn't like. And then I became an assistant manager of a huge store at 17. And so then I took that and I got a promotion to a manager in a different department. And then I learned framing. I learned how to, I don't got anything here. But like all this cool stuff we got framed around our house, I can do by myself. And then even little things like when I go change the garbage bag in the kitchen. Chanel, you ever change the garbage bag in the kitchen?
Unfortunately, yes.
You ever put the garbage bag in and then it puffs up with air?
Yeah.
And then when you go to throw crap in there, you can't because it's full of air?
Yeah. Yeah.
Poke a hole in it. So that's something I learned when I was like 16, and I still do it however many years later, right? And so it's like, take these little micro moments in your career as you're dating these opportunities and then level up after each phase. So back to your question, like, would I still be where I'm at today if it wasn't for SEO? Yes, because I didn't force myself in the path of SEO. I dated those phases. And then when SEO presented itself, I was like, that's the career I want to marry, because I had dated so many opportunities before it where I learned what I liked and didn't like. So I was always pretty confident I would eventually do something on my own. I had no idea what it was going to be, but I was okay not knowing. And I think that's part of the beauty, is not forcing yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think, I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, going back to digital marketing, and like we were earlier, we were talking about potentially doing the same thing everyone's doing, but in a different way. And I think we had that conversation about those little minute little tweaks and the little adjustments. Somebody may change a copy here, somebody may change an image here. And we were talking about the hockey stick going through the roof because of those minor. I mean, but again, you're like the anomaly to that equation. Like, your system's completely not in that box. So like, how the hell do you explain that? Like, I mean, like, think about it. I mean, like, how did that work?
So I get leads from like two places. And the second one is relatively new. It's only in the last 2 years. So out of my 15-year career of owning the agency, 13 of those years, I got leads purely from referrals. Never spent $1 on advertising. And it's because I provide a good product, a good service. And so that keeps retention high. And then over the course of retention, you establish a relationship with your clients, and then that builds trust. And then through that trust, they send other people. They send other people for a couple of reasons. One is because they'll put their name behind you in the referral for the good results, and they can communicate what the good results are. I don't have to go sell these things. By the time people reach out and contact me, this is why I don't have a sales team, is because by the time somebody gets to me, they've already been educated either through the referrals or the second lead source, which I'll talk about in a minute. And so by the time they get to me, they just go, I know you do SEO, let's just cut to the chase. Like, how do I start? So it completely eliminates the sales process. So they'll put their name behind you because they know the results that you can drive because they've done it. But then they'll also put their name behind you because of the relationship that you've established through the transparency and delivering your product. So now the other source of leads is LinkedIn. So I get on LinkedIn Monday through Friday. I post like a value-added content. And you even asked, you said, none of your stuff ever has a call to action. And it doesn't on purpose, because there's all these other people that say, send private messages, pitch in the DMs, and whatever. Like, whatever works, that's fine. Go ahead and do it. I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm just saying it's not for me. And so for me, I've always held my morals, held them strong. And there's been a lot of times in the infancy of my career where it was like, well, everybody else is doing that, so I should do it too. And so then you get this insecurity, and call it luck, whatever. I was always just barely confident enough to set that aside awkwardly, where I was like, I'm just not going to do that. And that felt like a missed opportunity. But once I made that decision to commit to not doing the shiny object thing, it felt right. And so then I could breathe easier, sleep better at night, whatever. And so I stuck to that long enough that it started to show value. And so then I kind of took that to the social media platform. So 2 years ago, I had only used Facebook, and I had a hard line where I used it only for personal. So if a client added me, I would just ignore them. I wouldn't accept them. And so then I said, Facebook is unproductive. I was good about screening out the people that are dramatic and all that stuff that we know about. So it wasn't like something happened. I just realized how unproductive it was. And so I got rid of it, and I didn't have it for about 2 months. And then I had like one friend that became a client. So they got through the screening mechanisms, and they were already on Facebook. And that was my method of communicating with them. And then since I closed down Facebook, I couldn't talk to them. So then I got thinking, well, I need to get a hold of them. And then why can't I do social media my own way? And I didn't know what that meant, but I was wanting to figure it out. So what I started to do was, okay, how do I talk about the things that I like, which are, my appreciation for my wife and kids? How do I showcase my expertise about business and SEO and team management? And how do I balance those two without completely alienating one versus the other? And so then I fired Facebook back up. And then I also started LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is B2B, and that's what my audience is. So it made sense. Now, after I did that, it took a couple months of kind of tripping over myself to figure out what the right voice was and what kind of things I want to talk about and how I feel comfortable in balancing those worlds. And after a couple months, I started getting leads. And then by 9 months, I quantified it. And after 9 months, it added about 150 grand in contracts. And so since then, it's just gone up. I haven't quantified it since, because clearly it was valuable enough to continue doing it. But that's the only other source of leads. So referrals and then social proof on LinkedIn. And to kind of wrap this up, it's all about sticking true to what my personality is. My personality is not sales pitchy. I don't like the sales vomit. I don't like the guru persona. I don't like the bait and switch and the clickbaity headlines and titles. And if you want to learn this really cool thing, I'll tell you. And then you got to dig through the post. And then it's like, just kidding, it's on this link. Like, it's just not my thing. And so what I do is, after I connect, I don't care if they necessarily follow up. We carry on a conversation in the private messages. Once we connect, now they're exposed to my content. That's the value, is exposing them to what I can showcase, my expertise and my appreciation for my wife and kids. And then where they convert is they follow me for the business advice. But then after seeing that consistently, because on Monday through Friday, I'm posting in there, a couple months go by, then they reach a point where they want your thing and they know you're the expert at your thing. And then they reach out, and then where they convert for me is they say, hey, I know you do SEO. We'll talk about that in a minute, but that was really cool what you said about your wife. And so they follow you for the product that you offer, but they'll convert because you're a human. And so I've just stuck to those. That's it. No sales team, no ads, no lead gen. I just get to post about my stuff that I like, and it attracts people.
Well, I mean, I think it became part of your persona and part of who you are. I mean, we were talking about like influencers, and influencers is like a switch, right? It's like they hit the switch and they become the influencer, and they hit the switch and then they kind of crawl into their caves, or they're completely different than what you see online. But you've bridged the gap between both. I mean, you're an influencer, but at the same time, who you see is who you are 24/7. So you made it easy for yourself, essentially. Your content is essentially you and your life and what you're doing, and what you're saying is, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about, like on networking groups, is like, people don't buy from you unless they could associate or like you or find some commonalities. And like the comment that you just made is like, before we talk about SEO, let's talk about that comment that you made about your wife. It's kind of like they get into your personal life. And honestly, even in my journey, I'm starting to see that more and more. It's to me, it's completely hilarious. Like, I'll post something about X, something random, and then I'll post a random clip with me and the kids going for a hike, and the engagement level goes through the damn roof in comparison to a nugget or a gem of information that I'm delivering, and there's engagement on that, but it's like 300% more engagement on random stuff. Like when we did our house, we did the kitchen remodel, the engagement on that thing was ridiculous. I was like, what the hell? Like, why? Like, why? Don't be asked, like, why are people so into your life?
You're human. Because you're human. Yeah, it's like a daily, soap opera in a way. Like people want to escape reality a little bit, and so that's the entertainment part of why they follow you. But then they also want to know that they're not alone, or that you can solve their problems, or you can, ease whatever, or make things better. People pay for convenience. And so when they realize that you offer that thing, and then through all your content, they've subconsciously built a relationship for you, then the sales walls come down, and it becomes that example of, hey, I know you do that thing, but that was cool what you said about your family.
Nice. But I mean, I think you jumped into a couple other spaces as well, all within the same synergy of like digital marketing, right? I mean, you authored a book, and you also had a podcast at one time as well too. So like, just talk about those two things. I mean, obviously you're not talking about standard lead gen, but you kind of created these other platforms, and the book makes perfect sense, because again, the book essentially is leading them into what you do. How did the podcast fit into that equation?
So these are these are good things because these are going to support more of the anomaly of the backwards way I've found success. So the podcast I did just because I wanted to do a podcast. Like it wasn't intentionally a source of lead gen. I had just thought about it for long enough that I either decided I either need to do something or stop thinking about it. And so I had enough of a network that I knew I could bring some good guests with good stories and good advice. And so it was really just do it or shut up. And so I started it. And then of course, when you run it for a while, so I had it for about 2 years, and I still have some episodes trickling in that I pre-recorded, but so I'll talk about the evolution of it. So I started it because I was just curious. I kept it because of the relationships. Once I started recording them, you meet all these cool people. I mean, it's how you and I met. And then look, now we're here in person. And then there's all these other people that I met that have led to relationships. And then it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier through the LinkedIn processes. They convert because of the subconscious relationship. And so then podcasting is a way to build relationships and showcase your expertise, just like I was doing on social media. So it's like the same thing, but on a different medium. And I've always come at it, like I said earlier, I don't know if it's luck or what. I don't really believe in luck. Like everything I've accomplished, I've been very strategic and worked hard to accomplish it. But there's one thing in my life that I could, for lack of a better way to identify it, I'll just say it's luck, is that I've always been okay with delayed gratification. I've always been okay with not forcing things, or confident enough to not force things. And so through the evolution of the podcast, and I'll talk about the book in a minute, and the social media stuff we talked about, I don't hard sell in any of these situations because it's just not my thing. And guess what happens? Because you build a relationship, it does the selling anyway. So now, like you were saying, I get to be me. I don't have to like fake things. I don't have to go through, nobody likes being sold. Everybody likes to buy, but nobody likes being sold to. And so now I can still have the sales conversation without having to try to sell people. I still get to put food on the table, and just but do so in building, genuine relationships. And so whether it's that person, so I'll give you an example of different types of relationships and content consumers. So as I post on social media, as with the book, which I'll talk about, with podcasts and things like that, there's primarily 3 types of content consumers in relationships. So one is the person that takes your advice or the relationship and runs. Like I tell them how to do this SEO thing, they go do this SEO thing, and I never hear from them again. Fantastic, because they were never my customer anyway, and I just helped somebody. Yay. Now the other types of content consumer is somebody that needs your thing, but not right now. But now they trust you. Now you have a relationship, or maybe they have a friend that needs the thing, and so they introduce the person, or they come back later and buy your thing. Yay. Now the third type of content consumer is the person that needs your damn thing, and they just buy the thing.
Yeah.
So out of those 3, you can't lose. And so that's how I've approached social media and relationships. I don't go into, you get on these Zoom calls with people to network, and then the first thing you do is go into this vomity pitch of why they're the most amazing insurance guy. They're going to save you, hundreds of dollars. And it's like, dude, I could talk to 57 people today, and all 57 are going to tell me the exact same thing that you just said. Because
insurance is sexy. It's very sexy. When you have those calls with insurance guys and gals, you just sit there, and the only thing you're thinking about is all the sex appeal that's coming across the screen.
Dude, for real. Yeah. And that wraps up our discussion about demarketing.
Oh man, I think one of the things that you led to was like systems, right? And I think that's probably one of our cards. But I think you were telling me a story about how you went back through your Facebook account and you removed everything.
Yeah.
And you kind of started fresh. So I think like I want to talk about that because I think people don't like understand like how the hell do you do it? 2, why would you even do that? And 3, what was the cause and effect of actually removing all that information and starting over your Facebook account completely fresh?
So that goes back to the 2.5 years ago where I just got burned out on Facebook. And so we all know that if you delete Facebook, it doesn't really delete it. You can just log back in and it's just there. And so in the industry that I'm in, I'm aware of, data flow and things like that. And so I knew it didn't really go away. And so I told my wife, I said, I'm going to delete everything. And she's a stay-at-home mom. And so I asked if she could help out in between shoot when she was doing other stuff. And it took her like 3 weeks. She was awesome. She went through and I logged into my account. on her computer, and she manually unfriended every friend, deleted every private message I'd ever sent, deleted every post I'd ever made on somebody else's thing. You know what? Every time I tell the story, you know what I'm surprised about? Nobody's ever questioned me as if like they're like, damn, dude, I would never give my wife access to my DMs. Which I think is a whole other story. Like, I got nothing to hide. I mean, it's the same thing. Like, well, I guess it's not a different story. It's the same thing. It's like you being you.
Yeah.
So my wife went through and wiped everything out, and then and she actually followed suit. She did the same thing, and she deleted hers, and she kept hers deleted for a little bit longer than I did. So that's why I did it. It was more just personal privacy protection because I knew that it was still out there. And then maybe that's kind of a transition into about how I run social media now is how I balance all these things, because you being here can probably attest to like how much of a family person I am. And I like talking about my wife and kids, but if you go look at any of my social media content, you won't see any identifiable pictures of my kids. I will share pictures of them, but they're always like a backside, or them running in a field at a distance so you can't identify them.
Or skateboarding through the airport.
Or skateboarding through the airport, yeah. Riding scooters to the airport, yeah. Or I just posted one yesterday talking about how it's a good feeling of how proud my kids are of their dad. And so my oldest kid rocks SEO National stickers on his laptops, and he steals my hat and wears my SEO National hat. And so that was part of the balance I had to figure out, was like, how do I authentically talk about my appreciation for my wife and kids without exposing their privacy? And so, and also without being fake. I don't want to be like going up to my kid and say, hey, turn around so I can get a picture of the backside of your head. And so like I had to find like, so what I do is I write the thing that I want to write that shows my appreciation. And then I have to go back through the real pictures and go, do any of these fit this topic? And so that way I can share a real picture and really talk about my relationship with my kids without having to do the crappy BS of staging pictures and things like that.
I could definitely attest to that. I mean, it was like, I don't know, it was like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning when we had woke up, and I seen him over there working. I'm working, he's working, and I seen him type all the stuff up, and then I see the image, and then sure as hell, like within 20, 30 minutes later, then the image was on Facebook, and I was like, aha, that's his process. So it's kind of like, to hear you say it, it's kind of like intriguing. I mean, like you still are writing your own content daily.
Yeah, because I want it. I mean, that's the underlying theme, is I don't want to be anybody different than me. So so my process of content on social media is I'm more personally active on Facebook. So whatever it is I want to talk about, I'll just post it there. But then after I post it there, then I'll go put it in Trello for my team to put on LinkedIn. So that way it's still my content, but they can push it out while I'm doing other things. And so I've narrowed down a window for where I get the best engagement for my audiences between 6:30 and 7:30 in the morning. But between 6:30 and 7:30, I'm either on Zoom doing other things, because I like to get in my extra hours in the beginning of the day, because my kids might be up late and I don't want to take away from that time, but they'll never be up early. So I get in the extra hours at the beginning of the day. And by 7:30, my kids wake up 7:30. And so there's that window where it's prime exposure on LinkedIn is also the window where I have other priorities. But then that solves the problem, is now I can still be me and share my words. It was just my team that just hit copy and paste for me.
Interesting. I think we're ready to transition to the next.
Oh wait, we gotta talk about the book. You gotta talk about the book.
Pull out the book.
Okay, so I wrote the book largely for the same reason I did the podcast, because I wanted to write a book. I thought about writing a book long enough that it was either just do it or stop talking about it. And true to my unique position is I don't do anything with it. Like I just give it away. So I have like freeseobook.com, and anybody asks, I'm like, you can just go get a PDF there, or give me your address, I'll mail it. Like I take a loss on that thing all the time. Like you can't see it behind my chair here is I got this little cabinet full of copies of the books and envelopes they send them out in. And I'll take losses all the time on that thing. I'm probably, if I had to take a guess, I quantified it about a year ago. So if I had to guess now, I'm probably in the hole about $8,000 on that book. Well, it costs, that's not counting the $20,000 to write it and distribute it. So once it was done, I've probably given out about $8,000 worth of printed all inclusive costs of the book itself, custom mailers, postage and stuff like that. But it's paid for itself because I established relationships with everybody. I well, you know what? Did you probably caught that call earlier where it was a guy, it was a pretty short call, and I just said thanks. You know, you couldn't hear the conversation because I had headphones in, but my replies to them were, you know, thanks, congratulations, things like that. So it was a lead that just had a baby. And once he told me he just had a baby, and I said, is it your first kid? And he said, yes. And I had already sent him like a thank you package or like a congratulations package. And it was nothing branded. It's from a third party, and it has nothing to do with business. And that's just the way I am, is I just like to give recognition for milestones of people. And so in between sending that, I sent that before he had signed. I didn't send that contingent on him signing. It was the right thing to do for me. And then in between sending that, he signed. And then a couple of days after he signed, he gets it today. He gets the package today. And he calls me and he says, hey man, I just want to take some time out and just say thanks. He called me just to say thanks, not to talk about business or anything. And he says, I brought my wife to tears. Obviously you've had kids, you understand, you know, it's hard to do all these things. And I was like, yeah, I just wanted to send a congratulations, but without being intrusive and getting in your way. Everybody all means well that says, let me know what I can do and how I can help out. But none of us reply to that because we're trying to keep our head above water. And so it's like, hey, here's this cool thing that's very personal. It's like this really cool gifting package where it comes with soup and like a ladle, and it's like custom boxes, and it's this whole unboxing experience. It's not just food, it's like it's an experience. And so it means something. And so I try to do those things that will mean something to people. Just like when I send our welcome kits to there's one by your foot if you want to grab it. There's just a little bit like, so these
don't forget the media man.
Yeah, the media mail. So like here's like a new client, right? And so we do these packages, and in it are like, it's just educational, and it's like very custom, and it's not swaggy. Like I'm the anti-swag kind of guy. And because instead of pushing my thing on them, I come to their thing. And we're going down a rabbit hole. I don't know where I'm gonna end this, so I'm just gonna end it.
No, I mean, I think you're bringing up all solid points. I mean, it's I always say like you're the good guy in digital marketing, right? I mean, it's a proud thing to hold that badge, because to your point, digital marketing on one side is sales, and the other side is kind of like sleazy influencer, influencers and stuff like that. So I mean, you're kind of like a unicorn in this space, definitely, for sure. I mean, there's obviously some other chosen few, but the masses are essentially assholes and jerks. But
well, they're just out to make a dollar, and I don't hate on them for paying the bills, but there are more ethical, sustainable ways. It's not. I think that's a big part of digital marketing, is it's just a big hype reel, and so we just buy into it because that's the way it is. We all know it's a hype reel, and so we just all repeat and regurgitate the same crappy approach at a hype reel. Like half the stuff, well, maybe not half, but there's a big chunk of my stuff, I'd probably say 20%, where I talk about, are we swearing? We swear?
Why not?
I talk about like the shitty things, the stressful parts of being an entrepreneur. I talk about the truth of, like, I've been firing a ton of clients lately, and I talk about why, protecting your mental bandwidth and your sanity and things like that. And so, like, all these other people are just this highlight reel, like, check out my car and check out this place and this and that. Like, I'll do those things, but from more of a humble perspective, and it's not like I'm here, you're not kind of thing. It's more like I'm really excited that I get to have these opportunities, and it's cool that my wife and kids are here with me. And so it's like more of the humble showcase. So I'll share both sides of the coin, the wins, but also share the losses.
So let's talk about some of those losses for a minute. I mean, obviously you're talking about getting rid of clients, but I think that was due to not even the financial side of it. I mean, anytime you have digital clients, there's different personality traits that you have to deal with, right? And you kind of like stage yourself to where you want clients that know what the hell they want before they even get in front of you, so that way they're going to sign the contract without the negotiation. And I think a lot of people, they miss that. They're always reaching for the negotiation. They're always talking to a community of people, and the person's like, oh, maybe that's too much, that's too high, could you add this, could you do that? And the reality is kind of like, that's not your target audience, that's not your consumer. You shouldn't even be talking to that person. And it goes back to you firing people. You're firing people because, again, you need to fire them to keep your business sustained, and to keep the mental health of you and your employees collectively. So let's talk about firing clients for a minute.
Well, even you just talking about chasing a sale stresses me out. Like those people that are like always be closing, bro, and they're just like, take any sale you can get. Oh man, I'm the total opposite of that. The first thing I look at is like, is legit the opposite. Is, do I want this? Like, why would I say yes? And so the firing thing is not too common. I have zero problem doing it. The reason why it's not too common is because usually I'm very good at being proactive about it, but I'm ratcheting that up. So historically, I'm good at, you be in business long enough and whatever, an expert in whatever you're an expert in, you develop like a sixth sense. Like most of these people that I talk to, I can tell before they finish their first sentence exactly what type of client they are based on the types of questions they ask, the comments they make, and their tonality and how they say it. So I don't often have drama with clients anymore. And another reason why is I have like a no assholes clause in my contract. It straight up says we don't deal with jerks. And then there's a big part that says we made this text really big for a reason. Read it. And it's all, you're not getting my cell phone. You're not calling me on weekends. Our phone shut off at 5 o'clock. Like, we don't do launches on Fridays. And so everything must be scheduled at least a minimum of a day in advance. And these are all the things that everybody dies for because they want them. So why not just ask for them? Because the only reason why engagements are weird is if you let them be weird. It is not weird me telling clients you are never, ever, ever getting my cell phone. The only time it's weird is if I didn't say that and later they ask for my cell phone. So if I tell them in advance, like, hey, here's the rules of engagement, and I tell them in the negotiations, I put it in the proposal, and then in that welcome kit that I held up, there's another printout that says, just so you don't forget, you're not getting my cell phone number. And so like, that's the key, is just be proactive. Like whatever it is you want to do in business, whatever the structure and environment you want, just set that up. Nobody cares. And if anything, they appreciate you more. I've never had a problem with anybody that's like, why can't I get a hold of you on the weekends? Why can't I do this or that? And a lot of them, I would say the majority of them respect that, because then that portrays an extra level of confidence, which makes them feel more comfortable in conducting business with you and giving you that dollar. Or something else you said, but
well, I think part of what you just said is kind of like a lead in, right? I mean, from the psychological aspect, part of your content is always talking about or referencing your family. So by default, if you're a family person, the weekends should be associated to your family. So you're kind of instilling that in them anyway. So that way, when they come to you, like, they should already know it's a hard no. Like, you're not willing to sacrifice that. So it kind of leads back to developing the content in your lifestyle, your real lifestyle.
Well, it's so that started as a foundation for me when I was just a solopreneur. And as you say that, I realized that the bigger reason why we maintain that now is to also protect my team's mental health. I don't want my team ever feeling obligated that they have to take a call on the weekend. So that's why I communicate it now is so the clients don't ask for those calls on the weekends, because then that puts everybody in an awkward position, because then it's like, then my team doesn't want to say no because they don't want to let me down, or they don't want to let the client down, but they certainly don't want to take the call because they got the family thing on the weekend. And then it's awkward for the client, because then they're like, no, you're not good enough for me to talk to you on the weekend, is how it could be taken, right? But if you say in advance, nobody cares. Like, if you because then it's not contingent on that moment. It's not related to that moment. It's just the rules of engagement. The other thing, okay, I remember the other thing was firing clients. So I don't have to often fire clients because of all the stuff we just talked about. The reason why I'm firing clients lately is not necessarily because they're dramatic, because I'm good at pre-screening those. It's the 80-20 rule. It's like, there's a 20% chunk that are taking up 80% of my time, and my time is increasing in value. And so I'm willing to take a short-term sacrifice for a long-term gain in letting those guys go. So in about 8 weeks ago, I cut $90,000 in recurring annual contracts in about a 10-day span. And also, while I cut that, I increased payroll 150 grand. So I took a $250,000 risk, short-term loss, to benefit for the long-term for potential. And it took about 0 days before that paid off. I mean, it wasn't but a couple days later where a couple other leads committed, because then I can spend my time there having those conversations on the better leads. So it's like for every one client I cut, 2 better clients come in immediately right behind them.
So you think that's the rule of thumb? I mean, generally, I mean, I could attest to that as well too. Like when you get rid of clients that pretty much the second that you see an email or a text message or a phone or whatever, like the anxiety kicks in.
Yeah.
Versus the ones that you want to speak to and you want to help, and obviously you're going to get them better results. Even though you're going to try to get all your clients' results, but the ones that are willing to work with you, you can definitely see the results and the pride in the work that you're doing with them as well.
Well, you saying pride is a good point. It's that was one of the things that I had gone back and forth with one of my COO about one of the clients we just cut. Before we cut him, that was his take. You know, he's like, dude, it's your call. Like, I'm kind of new to the territory. So, but he kind of humbly added his 2 thoughts. And that was one of them is, in 6 months from now, can we and the customer, is there a chance that they're going to say, I'm proud of what we've accomplished? And it was a no, because that client in particular kept getting in their own way. And so then that's the other thing to think about is like, sure, do you want, you know, it's always nice to have an extra income, but is an extra 3 to 6 months of painful engagement worth a bad review that's going to haunt you for years? And so that's why I keep saying short-term loss for long-term gain. Like I have no problem making that sacrifice. In general, certainly it was uncomfortable or unfortunate sometimes, but seeing how the, you know, the world works in that way, it's never had a negative impact. And so now I have zero hesitation in just cutting people.
Definitely interesting. All right, let's switch it up. I think we covered.
That was one Post-it note.
I think it was one Post-it note that we kind of just continued out. So I think we touched on probably all the Post-it notes, but it doesn't.
Yeah, that one not bringing anything up.
Well, this one, reach out. We talk about reach. I think for me, when we're talking about reach, it's like I'm like you in a sense. I'm a real systems guy, but I think our systems are like, it's funny because we were comparing systems, we was comparing processes, and there's definitely some similarities. But and then every time I would ask you the question, you'd be like, no, I don't use that, I don't have that. But and still, I think you understand like the philosophy behind it, and even you kind of give me some pointers about particular systems that you use as well. But I would say if you're going to dive into any systems, you have to have a system that essentially would work from day one. It can't be a system that you're fumbling around trying to figure out for like 6 months. It has to kind of start to actively work early on. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Like I get anxiety thinking about Salesforce because Salesforce, its strength is or they renamed it to Keep, huh? Yeah, they renamed it. Anyways, all these like super gangster platforms that have a million options, like that's their superpower, but it's also their weakness because you can accomplish anything with Salesforce. Well, holy shit, I don't want to log in because it's just like this giant blank slate of a maze, and it's going to take forever. So my COO, he's super techie driven, and he always loves like the newest thing, and he's always texting me, I'll have to show you. We just had this text just the other day, and he's like, hey, you should do this thing. And I said, why? And his reply was, because I care about influencer Damon. And I was like, influencer Damon's got other things to do. And he's like, but you could, it was a blogging platform where you can get a rev share of the monetized traffic. And so I was like, well, why would I want to make a passive $5 there at the expense of making an earned $1,000 over here? And so just because it's exciting or new and generates money or productivity doesn't mean it's more profitable or more productive. And so I'm the one that's always like, no, I don't want to trip over $1 to pick up 50 cents. No, I don't want to add this other thing. I get why it's cool. I'm interested too, but there's a superpower in keeping things simple. So like even in the SEO space, like for the listeners that know SEO tools, like I don't use Ahrefs, I don't use SEMrush, I don't use all these industry leading tools because there's others that do the same thing, but way more simplistically and way more cheaper. So I always try to focus on simplicity and minimal integrations.
Well, I think also too, I mean, you stay steadfast and you stay focused as well too. I mean, the reality is it's kind of like if it's not broken, then you don't want to try to fix it.
Yeah.
And you kind of keep your systems in place that way. I mean, and versus myself, it's kind of like I like the creation of making systems autonomous, and that's like my I'm always reaching for that. I want, and I know it's never going to be an ultimate system, but as close as I can get to a system to where 80 to 90% of what I want to be done can get done and convert. And then you put in the influencer, or you put in the communication, you put in back the community. That's less work that you're going to have to do when you're talking to that environment and you're being yourself and you're being genuine. So, I mean, I get glad in that. Like, I totally get into where, yeah, it's a new platform, but to your point, $5 versus $1,000. Why switch over?
Yeah, I try to look at the net difference. I try to visualize what the net difference is, because there's nothing wrong with all these other platforms. They're cool, they're sexy, they provide value, but I try to look at, is that value at the expense of anything else?
So I mean, with your onboarding processes, as far as you finding the systems and the software that you use right now, I mean, at the beginning you have to kind of juggle between multiples to kind of iron out the wrinkles and figure out which one you want to select.
Yeah, there's trial and error. I mean, now we've got an extensive list of processes that we don't have to deviate too much and look at new tools too often. But when we do, the first thing I consider is, can we use anything we already have? Like, if we got this new thing we need to solve, do any of our existing solutions have a way to solve that? I don't go look for new things. I try to see, can we perfectly solve it, or solve it close enough that it offsets the pain of having to go add in another thing? Because another thing you got to think about is like, is continuity of all the integrations. Like, at what point does one thing break? Because you build out this super amazing system that's got 100 things, but if the one thing in the middle breaks, then you don't have to fix one thing. You got to fix 20 out of the 100 things because they all interconnect. And maybe the one thing's deprecated and you can't connect it anymore. So then you got to go find a whole other thing and restart that marathon that might break again in a couple of years, So the simplicity, I try to focus on simplicity just for quickness to productivity, because the simpler it is, the easier it is to use. And then also future-proofing it, because the more stuff you add, then the more potential there is for something to break down the road.
So I'm gonna play devil's advocate with that, because I mean, in one statement, I think it's 100% correct. Like Salesforce, QuickBooks, and some other platforms out there, like they are so big to where an average user was not gonna be able to use 60% of what the platform can do. And then on the other hand, you may get a single platform to do 2 or 3 of those core features that you use every single day. And then when you get ready to scale, you're going to hit a particular hurdle that Salesforce would do no problem, but now you have to find a secondary program to do this one procedure or this one step or this one integration. So it's kind of like,
but you wouldn't know what that one thing was until you found success and got far enough down the road to hit that roadblock. So it's just like, it's just like the analogy or the story, which I'm confident you'll agree with, is how I compare this. Is so many people over plan a business launch. They want their business plan and they want this, and they want that. And you're going to learn way more by starting than by mapping it out. And once you start, whatever you had started to map out, or in theory would have mapped out, completely changes anyways. So I would apply that same rule to processes. So yeah, sure, I could map out a perfectly polished business plan for the next 10 years, but once I start, it's probably going to dramatically change. So it's the same thing with going with Salesforce. Sure, you can accomplish anything, but at what expense of actually hitting the road and making progress?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, as far as like, that kind of goes into like my latest product with like launching and launch strategies. And it's kind of like, I end that entire program with relaunching, because again, no matter what you create and what you develop in a period of time, whether it's 6 months, 6 years, you're going to have to essentially relaunch that all over again. So you have to kind of get used to, and I think we talked about that as well too, like people that kind of build their entire system around a single product versus creating a company
business. Yeah.
So if you're going to create a product, establish it in association to a business, but in the long term of it, even with that business being established, that original product, you could relaunch it. And a good example of that is like household brands like Comcast. Comcast has been Comcast forever. And when they wanted to kind of reach out to a new market niche, and the property of the share of the margins dropped at a particular point, they said, okay, let's rebrand. Let's recreate this. And now it's Xfinity. So now our kids are going to know what Xfinity is. And then our grandkids are probably never even going to know what Comcast is. So it's all about rebranding that initial brand into a new system to make it work for you in the long run, and not forgetting that at the end of the day, nothing you created in the beginning is going to be perfect in the end.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, once you figure out what the processes are and perfect that, then you can represent them in a million different ways.
So, I mean, with that, I mean, do you think you have done any like relaunching of SEO National? Like, have you like relaunched it in any shape or form, or have you just progressively kept the same brand exactly what it is and just kind of added on additional features as you move forward?
Yeah, it's we haven't changed hardly anything. So, I mean, we still have the same billing system I've used from day one, still 15 years later. By the time we documented processes and introduced those into a project management system, still on the same one. It's probably been 8 to 10 years. I'm a hardcore knower. Like, I'm like, my COO brings me stuff all the time, and it's cool shit. It's a hard no almost every time. Because there's like it's systems of scale. I mean, once you perfect a process, it's like you get to a point where adding new things just because actually breaks all the other stuff that works. Like, adding things to scale can actually prevent you from scaling. So I always try to keep things as minimalistic as possible. I mean, I'm really trying hard to give an exception, and I got nothing.
Definitely is. I mean, how do you what's your scale to stack that up? I mean, obviously SEO is SEO, right? And your systems are your systems, but with technology changing so drastically, so frequently, you don't think eventually in SEO there's going to be some kind of change to where you may have to modify or tweak your systems?
Well, I'll make slight adjustments, but the general process doesn't change. I mean, it's still generally the same process, but just with, maybe one more step or one less step. But no, I mean, this is one thing I talk about actually pretty consistently is, and you probably even heard me earlier chatting with somebody today talking about like the 3 pillars of SEO. So with SEO, we focus on, there's 100 different things to go in SEO, but if you distill it all down, it's primarily 3 categories. So one is what you do on your website, one is what you do externally to your website, and then a third is content. So the first one on what you do on your website is, does it load quickly? Is it mobile friendly? Does it look nice? Is it easy to navigate? Then the second thing is external credibility. Do other people talk about you? Is there brand recognition? And then the third thing is content. So do you write consistently on your website? Do you have a blog? Do you write on other third parties to get that external credibility and overlaps with that? And so if you think about the way that search engines have evolved over the years, then people will be like, well, what about when things went mobile? So in 2016, Google completely changed their algorithm to focus on mobile first. And as of today and ongoing, they're putting a bigger influence on voice. Guess how much I changed my processes? 0, because those boil down to still those same 3 core pillars. So like on the mobile friendly side, what that's asking is is Google saying, hey, we're going to show the websites that are easiest to use on mobile devices first in search engines. What does that mean? It means they load quickly. Cool. How your website's built. It means it has good design that fits on a small screen. Cool. Well, that's the code that will adjust depending on your device. It's still just design. So it's still the same core pillars. Okay, so what about voice? Well, Google there's nobody on the other side of the computer recording voice drops and uploading them to their website for Google to pull from. Where Google returns the voice answers is it goes, all right, somebody just asked me a question. What website can I access the quickest? Page speed. What one has the answers to the question that I was asked? Good content. And which one do I trust the most? Relevance and external credibility. It's the same freaking things. It's just being output. The output's different. The export's different, but the input to get the answers is still the same. So will that change at some point? Well, sure. Something will eventually always change enough that eventually it makes a significant difference. But in the last 15 years,
So, I mean, I'll play devil's advocate with that, right? So, I mean, now with the web 3.0 and metaverse and all that, I mean, everything you're saying definitely stands up. I mean, whether it's video, voice, all that is definitely concrete. But now we have this whole element of another universe on top of this universe. It's like I can't even like comprehend like the extent of it. Like I understand crypto, I understand NFTs, but I keep racking my brain about like what is it going to be like with like searching within that environment. Like, have you thought about that and looked into that at all?
It'll be the same thing. It'll be who has the right results that the search engine can access the quickest. Now, what vehicle in between, I don't know. We don't know what we don't know. But I can't imagine any scenario other than what currently exists that Google more or less determines the results on, because they're gonna determine the results on who has the right answers, relevance. That's going to come from content. Now, the forms of content may evolve, but it's still that pillar of SEO. It's going to be once we find the how did Google access that content the quickest? So it's going to be page speed or speed of whatever that medium is, still the same thing. So there's going to be different vehicles, but the approach and the methodologies as of now, as far as my crystal ball can tell me, are still going to be the same.
That's crazy, man. It's crazy. All right, let's step into the next topic. Man, you already talked about LinkedIn. I think we literally went through all our little notes, man, without even thinking about it. We went through processes. We went through SEO. Shit. Podcast.
We slightly touched on podcast.
We slightly touched on podcasts. We talked about systems. Let's dive into podcasts a little bit more. I think earlier today when we was actually he was pulling up like my podcast landing pages, which is essentially different than my podcast RSS feeds. And you were telling me about the different schemas, which I think some podcasts may have heard of. Some podcasts are like, what the hell is a podcast schemer? What the hell is a transcript schemer? Like that's some whole other, like, what is Essay talking about? Why does he keep saying this word schema? And as he smiles and chuckles over it, because this is his world, like he understands this shit so to the point to where it's ridiculous. So let's talk about that a little bit. Like, how does that even help with podcasting? And what the hell is a schema?
Yeah, schema is a language, like a coding language, is maybe a way to simplify it. It's structured data. So when you go to a website and you see text, that's text. But behind the scenes, they may have structured that data to tell search engines that it means something above and beyond just what's visible. So like, all right, here you go, viewers. Here's a paragraph of text, right? So just imagine you got a paragraph of text on your website and you read it and it's got 50 words. So visually you see 50 words and it means whatever it means that you can read. Behind the scenes, there's a little snippet of code before and after those 50 words that says, hey, Google, this is Essay's podcast. This isn't just text. This is transcribed text from the podcast. So now Google goes, oh, Essay told me what this text means. I can read the text, but he gave me context to it. And so now I trust it more because he held my hand and pointed me in the right direction. So there's all sorts of different schemas and structured data. There's podcast schema, there's product schema. Like for the e-commerce people, if you Shopify, it already has product schema built in. And so what product schema, like an example of product schema is if you go to a commerce website and you see the price and the product description and the variations, small, medium, large, red, green, blue, Google makes educated guesses. But with Shopify and other platforms, it says, no, we're telling you very specifically, this is the price. These are the variations that are available. Is it in stock or out of stock? So like if you ever go to Google and you type in a thing and you see like the 5 stars or you see the price, it gets that from structured data. Now, when you see those things, you trust it more and it stands out more. It has a higher call to action. And so you can only get those things if you more clearly communicate to search engines what those things are. So for the podcasters out there, you can go search podcast schema. It's SCHEMA. And you can even search podcast schema generator. And so there's all these different ways. Like if you're on WordPress, you can automate some of these things. If you're on different platforms, they have generators that you can, type in your podcast name and your guest name, and it'll kick out the code for you and copy and paste it into your website. So in doing that, search engines can't read audio. They don't not literally read it. They don't read images. They don't read video. They're getting better at identifying it, and certainly they can metaphorically read it, but they trust it a lot more. Like it's a lot more clear written word over audio. For sure what a written word is versus a 90% accuracy on an audio or video, whatever it may be. So if you take and add, so you got, for the podcasters, you got two benefits in transcribing your content. One is it becomes written word, so it's easier for search engines to read. Two is if you wrap it in that schema, now that written word becomes trusted more. So then your podcast can show up higher on search engines. And a great opportunity is for podcast hosts, you can actually leverage the credibility of your guests. So if you properly optimize and use schema on your episodes, well, then now when SA puts, Damon Burton is the guest, and if he optimizes it, well, not me, because I do SEO, so you're not going to rank for my name, but somebody else, then when they go search that name, your podcast may show up. So then you get the visibility and the traffic by being associated with that person, simply by making a couple little tweaks to how you present your text.
Yeah, so we had this conversation earlier today, and I was just saying, there's always another level. I mean, the reality is that you may find someone that's new, you may find someone that's been in the game for a minute, but again, if you circle yourself around with people that are always pushing their expertise to another level, because I understand SEO, but I do not understand SEO like this man understands SEO. It is a night and day difference when you're having this type of conversation. So you want to make sure you have that right aspect of people to communicate with. And it kind of leads me into, I think we can kind of close out with this, because this is like a topic of conversation on the internet right now. And obviously, I think all the Google keyword searches right now are 100% driven towards your man, Will Smith. 100% of the internet right now. And it's kind of goes into the keywords. I mean, it's this dude is probably going to be trending. We'll say he's probably going to trend until Thursday when something else disastrous happens. It's crazy.
So for the future listeners, today is the day after Will Smith smacked Chris Rock at the Grammys. Grammys or Oscars? What was it?
It doesn't matter.
Whatever.
Nobody even knows. The only thing they know is
he smacked Chris Rock.
Which is kind of
So we'll look at it from the technical perspective. So there's a bazillion websites that are now talking about the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So who's going to get all the traffic on the search engine? The one that Google trusts the most, the one that they can access the quickest, the one that historically has the most credible information. And so now, in a unique way, like you said, to close this out, this ties back to what we were talking about at the beginning about being a trusted source, a trusted resource, establishing relationships. So just like we talked about, I establish relationships with my leads. Google establishes relationships with websites. Therefore, Google trusts those websites more, those that have been historically kindest to it and done the most favors to it. So the simplest way to look at SEO is just do what makes Google look good. Don't have a slow loading website that makes them look bad. Don't write shitty content, makes them look bad. They're not going to send a visitor to a website that's a painful experience with irrelevant content.
Yep.
And so in doing that, you help the audience, but then you also establish trust with search engines.
But you're also talking about the redundancy as well too. Because I mean, right now, that key phrase, I mean, copywriters are going to have to re-paraphrase and rewrite everything that they're going to reshare about this particular topic to make sure that page is not exactly the same as another page just to get ranked, which is crazy.
Yeah. Why would I click on website X versus website Y when they're talking about the same things and they're sharing the same video and the same GIF and the same everything? It's what's value added, what's the unique value proposition, and why website X presents it differently than website Y. And it's the same thing. When I'm trying to avoid getting too technical with the SEO stuff, but when we map out the content strategy for our clients, we try to avoid the SEO garbage. We've all seen the crappy websites that it just doesn't read right. You can tell something's off, and it's got the keyword said exponentially too many times, which makes it an awkward read. Don't do that. Like actually write something that's value added. And so that's who's getting the Will Smith traffic right now, is somebody that can come in with a different perspective.
Yeah, like prime example, a good one to do an example would be his PR. That was like new relevant content for the same exact topic that was uniquely different of that situation. It was kind of like, what is she saying to him? Like is that speech that he gave for the award, was it scripted? Was it like, did she write it right then on the spot versus just talking about him smacking Chris? Oh man, it's gonna be stuck in my head for some time to come.
Well, I'll give you credit. He got me talking about current events, and I usually don't talk about current events.
Yeah, I usually don't as well too, but it was just kind of one of those things. This is kind of like a on topic, off topic kind of episode. So it's just free form, but yeah, it's relevant as far as what we did talking about the conversion of SEO. So if you want to kind of boost your SEO right now in today's world, you could use current events for that. But again, you're gonna have to write those current events in a unique way. It can't be the same exact crap that you see that everyone else is posting. And it's funny too, because when you talk about that, when you look at Google search results for when someone famous dies or some crazy accident or something happens overseas that's like a world event, you see all the major channels on the top of the search engine by default. And all I usually see is like they all paraphrase or rephrase the same damn headline over and over again. And then there's always this one unique, like, what?
Yeah, it's like the odd one, like
Michael Jackson's flying. What?
Yeah, like Will Smith ate a grilled cheese sandwich before he smacked Chris Rock. You're like, why do you?
And that's the one you click on. You're like, wait a minute.
I don't know if he really ate a grilled cheese sandwich, but I'm making stuff up here.
That's funny but true, man. But yeah, so I mean, going to the closing, man, I definitely appreciate you hopping on the Uncaged podcast for the second time, and I mean, this time we're in person, which is definitely cool, man, for sure.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm glad we got this together. This is fun.
Yeah,
I enjoy sitting side by side with SA.
Yes. The SEO Beastmaster has spoken.
Here's my shirt. He made me a shirt. It's in the other room.
Yeah, it has SEO Beastmaster on it. And those that don't know, but the original Beastmaster, definitely check out Beastmaster 1.
What he had a falcon? Was it a falcon or an eagle?
I think it was a falcon.
Right here.
He had a bunch of damn animals running around with him. So appreciate you guys, man. SA Grant, over and out.